Welcome to Sleep Stories, where soothing tales gently guide you into peaceful dreams. Relax, unwind, and let each story help you drift effortlessly into sleep. Far beneath the restless waves of the Atlantic, where light fades into an endless sapphire hush, lies a silence so deep it feels alive. There, among coral spires and veils of drifting sand, the ocean keeps its secrets. And one secret, older than any empire or star chart, hums quietly through the dark. The memory of Atlantis. The sea has a voice, soft as moonlight on calm waters. It remembers not in words, but in echoes, in the sigh of tides that once brushed marble shores. When the surface sleeps, when the stars blink gently above, the ocean whispers of a time when a city shone like dawn beneath the sky. Atlantis, the dream of man and the cradle of wisdom, born from sea foam and fire, raised by hands that spoke to the elements. It was said to be the meeting place between gods and mortals. Its towers were carved from crystal stone that captured the colors of the sun. Its bridges floated like silver ribbons above tranquil canals. At night, the city glowed softly, not from flame, but from energy that pulsed through its walls, drawn from the heart of the earth itself. In those days, the air was always gentle, filled with songs of wind harps that played upon the rooftops. Children laughed in marble courtyards as fountains danced with lights of blue and gold. Scholars gathered in great halls where the knowledge of the stars was painted on ceilings, constellations glowing softly as if breathing. And in the center of the city, where all paths met, there stood a single tree, ancient, radiant, and alive. Its roots were said to reach both land and sea, binding the two worlds in harmony. But before the city rose, before the towers gleamed and the harps sang, there was only water and fire, chaos waiting to be born. The story begins long before memory, when the gods, weary of the silence of the deep, looked upon the endless ocean and dreamed of a light within it. From that dream, Atlantis was conceived, a gift to the world and a lesson to it. They shaped a land from coral and crystal, letting mountains rise from the sea like the spine of a sleeping giant. Rivers formed, and on their banks, the first Atlanteans opened their eyes. They were not gods, but neither were they mortal in the way we know mortals to be. They carried the calm of the sea in their gaze, and the spark of creation in their hands. The ocean loved them, and so it cradled them gently, feeding their fields with salt-kissed rain and guarding their shores with endless waves. In return, the people of Atlantis listened to the sea. They built not against it, but with it. Every tower curved like a shell, every hall echoed with the rhythm of tides. Theirs was a civilization that did not conquer nature, but danced with it. And so the years passed, measured not in war or ruin, but in art and peace. They learned the language of crystals, harnessing the pulse of the planet to light their homes. They learned to heal with sound, to grow gardens that sang softly under moonlight, to travel the seas in vessels that floated like whispers. It was a world that could have lasted forever. But nothing born from perfection remains untouched by longing. For even in paradise, the heart of man wonders what lies beyond. The ocean remembers this, the first stirrings of curiosity, the soft envy of other lands, the ambition to rise higher than the tide itself. In those moments, the gods grew silent. They watched. They waited. Because every dream has its shadow. And Atlantis, for all its beauty, began to cast one. The birth of Atlantis. The awakening of light and sea. The dawn that rose upon Atlantis was unlike any other dawn. It did not come from the horizon, but from the sea itself. Light unfurled like a ribbon beneath the waves, gliding upward through glass-blue waters until the surface trembled with color. Then, in that shimmering stillness, land began to breathe. The first morning was quiet. The air was new, soft as the sigh of a sleeping child. Mist drifted across the newborn island, veiling mountains of ivory stone and valleys carpeted in silver moss. No bird yet sang, no breeze yet stirred. It was a moment between heartbeats, the world hesitating before taking its first breath. And then, from the heart of the island, came a sound, not a thunderclap, not a roar, but a note. A single, pure tone that shimmered through the air like crystal light. The sea answered with a hum, and the two sounds wove together, birthing harmony. From that harmony, life awoke. The Atlanteans were born not from clay or ash, but from light and sound. Their bodies shimmered faintly in the dawn, translucent as dew. They learned to walk by following the rhythm of the waves, and they spoke to one another not in words, but in melodies. Every voice carried a note, and together, their language sounded like a song sung by the sea itself. They built their first homes from shells and coral, weaving the ocean's gifts into shapes that curved like the moon. Each home glowed softly at night. Not from fire, but from the gentle energy that lived in every living thing. They discovered that crystal, when sung to, could hold light. So they carved crystals into lanterns and hung them across the city. By evening, Atlantis sparkled beneath the stars, like a reflection of the heavens below the sea. There was no ruler then, no crown nor law, for none were needed. Each Atlantean understood the balance between giving and receiving, between creation and rest. When one sang, the others listened. When one worked, the others shared. Harmony was their first and only rule. Seasons came softly. Winds danced across the island, carrying seeds from the sea's floor that grew into trees with silver leaves and blue fruit that shimmered under the sun. Children played in meadows of glowing flowers, their laughter echoing through the marble cliffs. And in the evenings, as the sun sank, the people gathered by the great tree in the city's heart. They sang to the stars, and the stars, it was said, sang back. The gods watched from afar, their eyes gentle with pride. They whispered to one another, "Look what peace can build." But the gods, too, knew the nature of creation, that every beginning carries within it an end, waiting patiently for its turn. The crystal heart. In the center of Atlantis, beneath the ancient tree, there lay a chamber, the crystal heart. It was the island's pulse, glowing softly with a light that seemed to breathe. The Atlanteans did not know who had placed it there, only that without it, the land would fall silent. They tended to it with care and reverence, singing to it in the old tones that shaped their world. Over centuries, their knowledge deepened. They learned to channel the energy of the crystal heart into their lives, to power their floating ships, to grow endless harvests, to heal even the gravest of wounds. They did not grow old quickly. Time touched them gently, like a slow tide upon the shore. But curiosity once again began to stir. The younger ones wondered what lay beyond the endless blue. They saw birds soaring toward horizons unknown, and their hearts ached to follow. If the sea gave us life, they said, perhaps it has other gifts waiting beyond its edge. And so they built vessels of crystal and wind, gliding across the waves in silence. They sailed to distant shores, bringing knowledge and healing to other lands. But as they looked upon the world beyond, they saw something unfamiliar. Conflict, desire, fear. Other peoples fought over land, treasures, power, things the Atlanteans did not understand. At first, they pitied them. Then, quietly, they began to envy them. For in their endless peace, the Atlanteans had never known passion, nor struggle, nor victory. And in envy's shadow, pride began to bloom. They returned home changed, not darker, but more aware of themselves. They began to speak of greatness, of destiny. If the sea chose us, they said, perhaps it meant for us to lead. The gods listened and said nothing. The sea, too, grew quiet. The age of radiance. Centuries passed, and Atlantis reached its zenith. Where once stood simple coral homes, now rose vast palaces of white stone. Bridges arched across rivers of silver light, and towers reached toward the stars. The Atlanteans had learned to draw energy directly from the crystal heart, feeding their cities' endless glow. Night became eternal twilight, a realm that neither woke nor slept, but dreamed endlessly. They built schools where the secrets of the cosmos were taught, and temples where sound shaped matter. They mapped the stars and spoke of traveling among them. They looked upon the surface world and saw only chaos. And from that belief, pride became certainty. We are the keepers of balance, they declared, the guardians of perfection. But even as they spoke these words, the sea began to murmur in warning. Its tides grew restless. The winds whispered differently. The harmony that once wove their world began to shift, not violently, but subtly, like a note slightly off-key in an eternal song. The gods turned their eyes once more toward the island, and in the deepest chamber of the crystal heart, a faint crack began to form. The Golden Era, the years that followed the island's first breath, spread like a slow ribbon of light across the ocean, steady, patient, and warm. It was an age that wore gentleness as its garment, days that moved with deliberate grace, nights braided with soft lanterns, and mornings whose light seemed to sigh rather than strike. They called this time the Golden Era, not because everything glittered with gold, but because the world itself felt gilded with a quiet wealth of knowing. Every street was a lesson in small marvels. Marble steps were polished by the passing of careful feet. Fountains kept their steady laughter, and the air tasted faintly of sea mint and citrus. Hands there learned crafts that were both humble and miraculous. Glass blown so thin it trembled like breath. Fabrics woven with threads that shimmered like fish scales. Instruments carved to capture a single perfect tone. In the market squares, merchants arranged their wares as if laying out constellations. A string of blue fruit, a cluster of silver shells, a row of tiny crystals that caught and softened the light. Children wandered between stalls, their laughter like bells softened by distance, and elders sat beneath canopies, telling stories that folded history into myth until no one could tell which was which, and none needed to. At dawn, the city rose in a hush. People moved with the rhythm of the tides. Their tasks began and ended like simple songs. Fishermen braided nets that glowed softly in the moonlight as if stitched with threads of starlight. Gardeners tended plants whose leaves hummed tiny harmonies when touched, and healers used the music of stones to soothe fever and mend bones. Every knowledge was practical, every beauty useful. They sang to grow bread and hummed to mend wells. The crystal heart, tended carefully in its deep chamber, was less an idol than a hearth, a shared source of warmth and purpose. And so they built, not only palaces but instruments of wonder. Bridges that spanned canals were strung with wind harps that played whenever a breeze passed. They made ponds whose surfaces reflected other times, so a child might glimpse an afternoon yet to come. They designed gardens where the flowers only opened when a quiet, true thought was spoken near them. Even the streets were planned with a kind of poetry, curving in ways that encouraged conversation and chance meeting. There were festivals that grew like coral on the calendar. The nights of silver, when everyone wore thin veils threaded with tiny crystals and danced slowly until the stars burned brighter. The Feast of Echoes, when people gathered in the Hall of Resonance to let history speak back in the voice of music. And the Day of Return, when sailors came back from distant shores and carried stories like treasures, gifting them to small, eager ears. These celebrations were not noisy spectacles, but long, gentle ceremonies in which time itself seemed to slow and breathe with the people. In the heart of the city, by the ancient tree whose roots reached toward both land and sea, sat the great schools. They were not crowded with fans or ivory towers of pride, but with rooms of patient light. Scholars there studied not only the stars, but the way music shaped the mind. Artists learned how to paint with sound, and young apprentices were taught that the true measure of strength was the ability to listen. It was an era in which questions were offered like soft gifts, and answers were returned with calm. People asked not to conquer, but to understand. They sought maps of weather and song, charts of the tides, and of memory. Their libraries were less about inked pages than about living manuscripts, scrolls grown from the bark of gentle trees that would sing their stories when read aloud. Knowledge in Atlantis was never hoarded. It passed from hand to hand, shared as bread is shared with the same deliberate tenderness. Among the many quiet craftsmen, there were those who shaped light. They learned how to coax brightness from crystals, how to make a lantern sing in tone as it glowed, and how to set small pulses of energy so they would not burn but soothe. At night, the city resembled a constellation turned to earth, gentle pools of light, pathways rimmed in soft glow, windows like the eyes of friendly creatures blinking in unison. It was a civilization whose luminescence never woke the mind. It only reminded it to feel at ease. Yet the golden era was not an unbroken perfection. Even in its beauty, there were contrasts like the soft shadow under a leaf. Curiosity, that quiet engine of growth, pulled at some hearts with a stronger force than others. The artists sought new forms. The sailors longed to touch the horizons beyond the sea glass. The scholars dreamed of bending sound to heal not only body but history. These were not faults but stirrings, small ripples that would, over years, become waves. Of all the songs sung in that time, there was one common theme: balance. Children were taught the lullaby of listening. Farmers recited the prayer of reciprocity before sowing. The people of Atlantis took from the sea with gratitude and returned to it with offerings. Small woven boats, songs, the first fruits of an invented harvest. Even the city's architecture embodied humility. Towers bent like reeds in the wind, and walls opened toward the water, not away from it. It was a place in which the act of living itself was composed as a quiet hymn. Love, too, in its many gentle forms, found fertile soil there. There were lovers who met on the bridges at dusk and whispered in harmonies so soft that eavesdropping seemed an act of violence. Parents sang to children in tones that carried well into the night, teaching them the sound of names and the cadence of patience. There were elders whose faces shone with the slow wisdom of tides, who would lead a young one to the water's edge and whisper, "Let the sea teach you how to return." Among the people were those whose names would become small legends, not because they conquered or commanded, but because they listened and altered their world by care. There was Arel, who carved tiny flutes from shells and taught children how to breathe slowly. There was Maris, a gardener who coaxed flowers to bloom at the sound of a remembered laugh, and Vera, an engineer with hands warm as hearthstone, who designed bridges that hummed lullabies when walked upon. They became known not as heroes, but as keepers of the city's soft heart. As the golden era matured, trade with distant coasts blossomed in quiet ways. Mariners who visited Atlantis left its harbors with jars of salted wine and songs taught by lantern light. They carried back stories of a city where music and sea had become one, and those tales spread to distant shores like a comforting rumor. Travelers returned not to conquer, but to learn, and in return, they took away a manner of calm that seeped into foreign towns. And in the crystal heart's deep chamber, life wore a steady pulse. The shards there sang in small measures, keeping day and night in a slow balance. The priests who tended it spoke in tones of gratitude. They taught that the heart was not a source of dominion, but a mirror, a device that reflected how the people lived. If they sang with humility, the heart responded with warmth. If they sang with pride, it quivered and gave back a light strained at the edges. So the golden era moved like a slow tide, carrying with it all that was soft and true. The city's breath became an example, the way in which a people might craft a life of creativity and care, where knowledge and art were blessings shared, where the sea's rhythm was a teacher and not a prisoner. For a long while it seemed that such a way of living might ripple outward, altering not only one island, but the very manner in which life could be held. And yet, as every patient teacher knows, the very qualities that make a society gentle can also make it fragile. When a world is built upon agreement and mutual listening, the first loud voice that forgets to listen can begin a subtle unwinding. Small separations find footholds. A practice begins to be performed for show rather than feeling. A path grows to be trodden quickly rather than savored. Over time, repetition hardens into custom, and custom can misread itself as truth. On a certain evening, beneath a sky embroidered with pale moons. The people gathered for the festival of quiet. They wore veils that caught the light and walked with music woven through their steps. Lyra, though yet young, stood near the tree in the city's center and hummed an old lullaby learned from an elder. Her melody threaded the crowd, and for a time, everything settled into that serene balance the city so cherished. But among the watchers, strains of a different song stirred quietly. A line of scholars who spoke of potential too grand to ignore. A group of builders who imagined towers that would not merely touch the sky, but command it. They did not yet sing loudly. Their ideas breathed like seeds. Yet seeds, when nourished by the warmth of praise, can grow into branches that shade the very roots that feed them. The golden era closed its eyes that night as it had for many others, content, luminous, and unaware of the small fissures beginning to form beneath its surface. The people slept in rooms that hummed softly. The fountains whispered. The crystal heart breathed its even, gentle pulse. The sea rocked the city in a cradle of sound, singing the kind of song that holds a dream safe until dawn. If one were to ask the ocean to name the golden era, it would whisper of those days as a long, soft exhale, an era when the world learned how to keep itself gentle. It would tell you that for a while, humanity and sea met as equals, and they taught one another how to be still and how to sing. And that this music, held in the bones of the island, would be the very thing both to save them and to tempt them in seasons yet to come. The cracks of pride. The wind changed first. It no longer carried the songs of harps from the crystal towers, but a faint hum, low and uncertain, as though the air itself had forgotten the melody it once loved. Birds circled the island less often. The tides grew stronger, pressing against the marble piers with a rhythm that felt impatient. Yet within the city, few noticed. They were busy building higher. The Hall of Mirrors. At the summit of the central hill, the Atlanteans raised a new temple, the Hall of Mirrors. Its walls were made of living crystal, each pane reflecting the city in endless repetition. Atlantis within Atlantis, 1,000 shining echoes. The elders gathered there, admiring how their own faces gleamed in the light. "Behold what the gods have wrought through us," they said, and their voices filled the chamber like thunder in a cave. But the youngest among them looked at those reflections and wondered which of them was real. The sound that faltered. Music had once been the language of the people. Children learned to sing before they could speak, and harmony guided every gesture of their lives. Now the songs became performances, grand, practiced, flawless, and cold. They sang to impress, not to connect. In the evenings, the soft lullabies that once drifted through the streets were replaced by rehearsed choirs that echoed from marble courtyards. The city sounded magnificent and lonely. One night, an old musician named Phelan walked to the shore. He dipped his fingers into the tide and played a single note on his sea harp. The note was clear but short, cut off by a rough hiss of surf. "The ocean does not answer anymore," he whispered. No one heard him over the applause from the amphitheater behind. The gift of the deep. When the crystal heart began to flicker, the scholars called it an opportunity. They gathered around the great chamber and measured the pulses that once glowed steady as breath. "Its power wanes," said one, "but perhaps it can be multiplied." They built channels, rivers of light, to draw more energy from its core. And for a time, it worked. Atlantis blazed brighter than ever. Towers shimmered like dawn, even at midnight. But beneath the beauty, the crystal strained. Hairline fractures laced its surface like frozen lightning. The priests who tended the heart heard faint sounds in the dark, tones that did not belong to any scale they knew. They called it the dissonance, a whispering hum that lived between notes, soft but unyielding, weaving through every song and every breath. Some said it was the ocean singing back in sorrow. The division of voices. Where harmony falters, argument grows. For the first time in memory, councils disagreed. The artisans wanted restraint. The scholars wanted discovery. The sailors longed to explore again, to find new lands, while the guardians forbade it, fearing impurity from the outer world. Meetings that once ended in song now ended in silence. And silence, in a place built on music, was a wound. One dusk, as the crimson sun sank, a young woman named Lyra stood upon the highest terrace. She had been born with a voice so clear that the stars seemed to tremble when she sang. Now she looked across the shining city and felt only distance between every tower. If we forget how to listen, she said, the sea will remember for us. Her words carried on the wind, soft as foam, and vanished into the gathering night. The dream of height. The engineers of Atlantis built a spire meant to touch the sky itself, to speak with the gods. They called it the Pillar of Dawn. Day by day it climbed higher, piercing clouds, gleaming with captured sunlight. But as its shadow lengthened across the water, fishermen noticed the tides growing fierce where that shadow fell. Boats capsized in calm weather. Coral reefs cracked with strange heat. Still the builders continued. It is the mark of our destiny, they said. When it is complete, the heavens will answer. The heavens did answer, but not with words. The night of tremors. It began with a vibration deep and steady, as though the island had become a great drum struck from below. Lights flickered across the bridges. The fountains stilled mid-arc. Then, in the crystal heart's chamber, the first shard fell, a sliver of light that burned to ash before it touched the ground. Phelan the musician, who had not sung for many years, took up his harp once more. He played the first melody ever written in Atlantis, a simple lullaby that mothers once hummed to their children. The sound spread through the empty streets, brushing against broken windows, gliding over sleeping gardens. For a heartbeat, the sea grew calm. Then the note dissolved, carried away by a roar rising from the deep. The warning of water. That night the waves struck harder than memory. They climbed the marble stairs, whispering against the columns, leaving trails of salt and seaweed. Some said they saw faces in the foam, old gods watching through the surge. The priests lit the halls with blue fire and prayed to the heart, but its light now throbbed irregularly, like a frightened pulse. Lyra stood once more upon the terrace and sang, not for pride, but for forgiveness. Her song wove through the wind, a ribbon of sorrow and peace. And in that moment the storm eased. The clouds parted just enough for the moon to shine upon the city, silver and still. But the calm was brief. Theocean was taking breath. The great silence. The morning after the storm, Atlantis woke to a sky the color of glass. No wind moved. Even the sea seemed uncertain, holding its breath. The people stepped from their doorways and saw the city mirrored perfectly in the water. Every tower, every arch, flawless and still. It was beautiful and wrong, for the sea is never still unless it is listening. The pulse fades. Deep within the island, the crystal heart flickered like a candle nearly gone. Where once it sang with steady tones, now it spoke in uneven sighs. Engineers gathered, laying their hands on its surface, whispering equations and hymns. They tried to pour more light into it, but the crystal no longer received. It rejected, pushing the energy outward in trembling waves that made the walls hum. Thalen heard it from his cottage by the shore. To him, it sounded like a heartbeat that had forgotten its rhythm. He placed his harp beside the window and listened, each pulse slower than the one before. He whispered, "The sea remembers. It calls us home, the Council of Dissonance." The elders met in the Hall of Mirrors. Reflections danced around them, thousands of faces repeating their fear. Some demanded more power drawn from the heart. Others begged for silence, for surrender. Lyra stood among them, her voice steady. "If we stop singing to the sea," she said, "it will sing for us, and its song will be sorrow." No one replied. Ambition and terror had grown too loud to hear truth. They voted to awaken the full strength of the crystal one final time, to send a beacon into the heavens that would prove Atlantis eternal. And so the decision was sealed like a stone falling through deep water. The light that broke. At dusk, the city gathered in the grand square. Children held lamps. Priests lined the bridges. From the mountain temple came a note, a single command tone that rose toward the stars. The crystal heart answered. For a breathless instant, Atlantis blazed brighter than the sun. Every tower turned to fireless light. Every street became a river of gold. People fell to their knees, awed and blind. Then came a sound, a low moan, ancient and endless, rolling up from the roots of the world. The crystal cracked, not once, but in 1,000 places, and the light that had sustained them burst outward like a sigh, finally released. The ground shuddered. Fountains burst into steam. From beneath the island came a roar so deep its silence thought. The sea, waiting patiently all these centuries, began to rise. The unmaking. Waves taller than palaces swept across the harbors, folding ships like paper leaves. Bridges broke, their ribbons of silver falling into the foam. Still the people sang, some in fear, some in faith, their voices mixing with the storm until song and sea became one sound. Lyra ran to the terrace where she had sung to the moon. The pillar of dawn glowed like a spear of lightning above her. She lifted her hands and sang the lullaby of beginnings, the melody Thalen once played by the shore. Her voice rose above the wind, pure and clear. For a moment the waves hesitated, curling as if listening. Then they embraced the city. Marble domes vanished beneath spirals of water. The Hall of Mirrors shattered into 1,000 shimmering fragments that floated like stars before sinking. The crystal heart burst silently, releasing its final breath as a column of light that pierced the storm clouds and faded into space. And in that light, so the sea later whispered, the souls of Atlantis drifted upward, slow as bubbles, their songs joining the wind. The quiet below, when the storm passed, nothing remained upon the surface. Only foam, white and pale, rolling across an empty sea. But far below, where sunlight can no longer reach, the ruins of Atlantis settled gently onto the ocean floor. There they lay, undisturbed, glowing faintly in the dark like embers under ash. Fish wove through broken arches. Seaweed crowned fallen statues. In the great hall where the crystal heart once shone, a single crystal shard still pulsed, slowly, softly, as though remembering the rhythm of a forgotten song. Above, centuries drifted by. The world changed, empires rose and fell. But the ocean kept its secret, the return of silence. Sometimes, when the moon is low and the tide breathes long, sailors hear a faint music rising from the deep. It is not wind, nor whale, nor current. It is a chord older than sorrow, a memory of harmony carried through water and time. Those who listen long enough say they dream of marble towers, of bridges that shimmer in twilight, of a woman singing beneath silver leaves. They wake with salt on their lips and peace in their hearts, as if the sea itself had touched them and said, "Rest now." The song continues, and so the legend lives, not in history's ink, but in the hush before sleep, in the moment when mind drifts like a shell across still water. Atlantis is not gone. It only waits, deep and patient, in the quiet where dreams are born. The sea remembers. Night spread over the world like a tide of velvet. Stars blossomed one by one, their reflections trembling in the quiet water. Far beneath that calm, where light becomes memory and sound becomes touch, Atlantis slept. For 1,000 years the ocean rocked the city in its arms. The marble softened into coral. The arches became homes for fish. Sand settled over streets once filled with laughter. The sea kept its promise to hold, not to forget. Above, storms came and went. Ships crossed and vanished. Whales sang to one another in the dark. And sometimes their songs brushed the stones of Atlantis, waking echoes that answered faintly, like dreams replying. The shard song. In the heart of the ruins, that single crystal shard still pulsed. It no longer glowed with brilliance, only with patience. Every few centuries, it released a tiny wave of light, so faint that only the oldest creatures of the deep could sense it. They would turn toward it and pause, as if remembering a melody they once knew but could not hum. Through that small rhythm, the sea carried Atlantis' heartbeat into every current, into every shore and drop of rain. Each tide became a breath of the sleeping city, the dreamers. On calm nights, when human hearts are quiet and open, the sea whispers its story. It visits those who lie between waking and sleep. Poets, sailors, children who fall asleep to the sound of rain. It shows them images, crystal towers veiled in kelp, a silver-haired woman walking through underwater gardens, a harp resting upon a rock, strings moving without wind. They wake, sometimes with tears, sometimes with awe, never knowing why the dream felt so real. But their souls remember. And so songs are written, myths are told, paintings made of cities under the sea. The memory of Atlantis becomes part of humankind's own pulse. The keeper of tides. Somewhere near the edge of the world stand a lighthouse built on forgotten stones. Its keeper is an old man who listens to the waves more than he speaks. Every night he hums to the sea, a tune no one taught him. He believes he invented it. Yet the ocean answers in perfect harmony. He smiles, though he does not know why, and his lamp turns slow circles over the dark water. Sailors who pass that coast say they sleep better that night, as though the waves themselves are telling them, "You are safe. You are home. The circle of rest. The sea does not end. It folds and unfolds like breath. In its depths, time is not a straight line, but a circle, each beginning hiding inside every ending. Atlantis was never truly lost. It simply became part of that circle. Its music diffused into the heartbeat of the world. The waves that lap against our shores tonight are the same that once kissed her marble steps. The sigh that drifts through shells is her song still traveling, the lullaby of the deep. Listen now, beneath the hum of the earth, beneath your own breathing, there is another rhythm, slow, steady, endless. Is the ocean remembering? It hums through your chest, through the floor, through the night. It says, "Rest, child of the shore. The world is vast but gentle. Dream as the sea dreams, without end, without fear. Let the salt air soften your thoughts. Let the waves wash the edges of your mind. Somewhere far below, the lights of Atlantis flicker once more, not as a warning, but as a welcome. They shimmer like candles beneath glass, guiding every drifting dreamer home.